there's a lot of areas in education in which the Ryan budget deals with, and one of the premises was that we have to deal with the deficit, and we do. We do. I mean, that's not something that we just walk away from and say, hell, we'll deal with that some other time. There is a real deficit. There is a real debt issue. And it's an inheritance issue for generations that follow. And so you have to deal with it. And we thought we had a good proposal that dealt with creating a surplus by 2021. And the Ryan proposal begins to deal with it, doesn't eliminate it, all the way up to 2030. The debt ceiling, the budget that we supported, got it down 64% by 2021. Didn't eliminate it, but certainly has got us into that area where we're not on the point of default if something goes wrong here. So we shifted. And it's really so the premise is that we should not ignore the deficit. You know, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that those of us that were opposed to Ryan's budget didn't just go in there saying no, because that's pointless. You know, nobody's going to believe that you're serious, and we're going to get dismissed as just being part of a process that doesn't deal with the economic realities that we're facing in this country. So our budget cut spending, but if you really want to cut the debate in a nutshell, is where you cut, not if you cut. And so ours cut spending in another sectors, dealing with the upper 1%, rolling back those tax breaks, and dealing with some of the tax subsidies for oil and gas, dealing with a responsible withdrawal from Iraq and Afghanistan that saves you money, additional cuts in military spending, closing corporate loopholes, and bringing tax rates back to the Clinton era for all incomes. And that includes the working folk as well. Their net gain from all these 10 years of cuts has been around $600 that they've saved in that process. And if you believe the premise of a shared sacrifice, then you have to share it. And so we brought a fair tax code where everybody has to kick in, but it's a proportional kick in. It's not skewed. And part of the problem with the Ryan budget is that you're still going to need to generate revenue, and so that shift will continue to go down to the people under the 2%. And so to areas in education, then we can talk about all this stuff. One of the things that Ryan, all the dirty details are not out entirely yet on the language, but here's just the premise to it. College aid for about 10 million students gets cut. The Pell Grant gets cut by about 21 to 2,500 from the 50 that it is right now, and that would make it the lowest level in about 17 years for Pell Grants in this country. And then the other area that we really think is really important, and that it cuts elementary and secondary education in our schools by 25%. And so if we are focusing on trying to prepare a generation of kids to be ready for the experience that you're having in higher education, then obviously our pool of available kids is going to shrink, and we're going to get into this whole situation where we're going to have a harder time being able to prepare kids and keep kids in school. So we're supporting the Pell Grants. We're also fighting to make sure programs that were eliminated and consolidated even under the Obama budget, and certainly eliminated under the Ryan budget, TRIO, Gear Up, keeping the loan program, protecting the fixed rate, allowing people to, and keeping the universities in a role where they're the primary responsibility for the student loan program, as opposed to putting it back where it was, creating that middleman situation, and eliminating the ability to consolidate. So we wanted to talk to you. You're here, you're having to deal with it. It's your debt at the end of your education that you have to deal with as well. And I know that the Pell Grants and some of the other things I'm talking about might not affect all of you, but certainly the student loan side, we tried to do something that, and it's still going to be a possibility. On the student loan side, about 40% of the money borrowed is from 8% of the colleges. And 8% of them are for-profit colleges, not public universities or not-for-profit universities. It's for-profit colleges, everything from ITT to Phoenix University to Tucson College, to on and on and on. And so 40% of the money borrowed comes from 8% of the for-profits. And the concern there is the default rate among those 40%. It's huge. It's like 27, 28%. And so we were concerned that if that kept going at the pattern that was at, with no gainful employment criteria, that it's going to begin to jeopardize the student loan program, period. So we have regulations to assess and to be able to talk about gainful employment, that as a consequence of you going to this college, that there is a possibility based on what you learn that you will have gainful employment that will help you begin to relieve your debt. The private colleges, the for-profit, not private, for-profit colleges, huge. I mean, they had more lobbyists than almost the pharmaceuticals for about 3 weeks there, opposed to that regulation. And if you analyzed it over and over again, it would probably affect less than 5% of the for-profit colleges in this country. And who are we after? We're after the bad apples. The ones that say, go ahead, take that $40,000 loan at the end of the year, 2 years, 18 months, you will have this degree, which will create this opportunity for you. Either the program's not finished, or there's no gainful employment at the end of that, and you're still sitting on a $28,000 to $40,000 debt that you can't pay. You go into default. The default rate for the student loans continues to go up, but it's only one sector that's really contributing to that. The public sector and private college sector is about 11.9%, but it's usually getting started those first 2 years, and then then you start paying off, and you get. It happened to me when I left the U of A. You get those notices in the mail. I don't know, you're not there yet. But it's kind of scary. And it happened to me, so we had to set up this whole payment plan and all that stuff. But I didn't have the kind of job that permitted me to send in the money that I had committed to send in as a consequence of the loan. Once we got on that, we were able to pay it off fairly quickly. And that usually happens. So the default among public schools, it's usually those first 2 years out of school when you're, especially in this economy, trying to figure out where the hell you're going to land in terms of a job equivalent to your education. The other issue that we were pushing very hard, and we will go back and push, is the issue of an immediate job creation program. And it's not just structured to the guy that's going to be doing, or the gal that's going to be doing infrastructure work, our bridges, our roads. We're talking about education, research capacity going up, and so that we can put our professional folk, and those are our recent graduates that are having trouble landing a job right now, put them in for a 2 to 3 year period so that A, experience, B, you're working, and you're paying taxes. That was part of our job. That's the one big job packet that we're still going to go back and argue about. So with that, let me just open it up for you for questions if you have any, and we can talk about some of the stuff that's going to go on with education.
Question.
Sure.
So, I mean, you were talking about the for-profit colleges, and I mean, I'm not familiar with that system of education at all because I go to a public university. But I was wondering if there's kind of like an average cost to attending those universities or colleges.
Oh, that's a great question. You know there isn't, okay? And this is they have to generate revenue.
Right.
Okay, and so the loan is becoming a bigger and bigger part of their revenue generation. In some instances, 80%. Phoenix University is 76% of the revenue generated comes from the loan program, from the students. And so since it's a big part of the bottom line for them, you push students into that area, you know? And so, no, there isn't. You know, my sister got her master's at Phoenix. I would say about $22,000 at the end of the process. But it depends. You know, ITT is $18, $19 a year. It depends. It depends. But the bad apples are the ones like, for instance, they'll say, we have a career counselor to help you when you get out of here. And they have, and it's an online private, for-profit. And they have 40,000 people online and one career counselor. And to get online, they help you with the loans. They have a wonderful system. It's probably better than the ones they have here at the U, because it's such an important part of the revenue generation that there's a great deal of dedication to making sure that you're processed right and that you get your loan. I worry because it starts to jeopardize the loan program entirely. There's a lot of critics to it. Now that we put it back inside the universities as a primary responsibility to administer the loan program, there's a push to push it back out. And I worry that we're going to, because of the default rate and the gainful employment issue, that people will start to making the argument, see, it's costing the taxpayers money and there's no return. Right now, it's a break-even program. That's why it's successful. You eventually pay it off. If the default rate starts going to such a rate, people are going to argue, well, why we're losing money. Because the program was set up not to lose money, it was set up to self-generate and to pay for itself over time.
I guess just to bounce off that, I mean, how do you evaluate the standards of those institutions? Because I've always been under the impression, maybe this is just because I go to the U of A and I get my son education there, but I've been very skeptical of those universities in the past.
There's a place. Mm-hmm. You know, for people, especially people that are working to do some stuff on the off hours. You know, they accommodate their life and their work life. There's a place, and there's some good ones. I think certainly in the technical health fields, there's some really good ones. But like I said, there's 5% bad apples. Right. And anybody can be, and the temptation, because so much of your revenue is dependent on the loans, to make that the whole focal point, and to attract students that at the inception you know aren't going to cut it. And that's why the regulations talk about gainful employee. I'm going to go recruit Raúl Grijalva to come to ITT and learn to do some hugely technical stuff. They know that my success quotient is going to be very, very small, yet I'm already locked into a $28,000 loan, regardless, which pays my tuition, pays all those costs. So when I leave the school, they're paid, and I have to default to the loan. I have, and so it's that gainful employment clause that they're more against than anything else, and it applies to, it's always applied to universities, public institutions, and they have, there's a default rate, like I said, it's between 7 and 13, but it's in those first 2 years, and then it starts to come back when people get established.
So aside from Pell Grants, which obviously affect a lot of students at universities, are there any other elements of student aid fiscal responsibility act that are on the cutting block?
I talked about Trio, Gear Up, even Talent Search that brings in kids. There's also the reduction in support for on-campus work. There's with the drop in support for research and development, it begins to hurt places like the universities that are making their cachet being research. With the reductions in math and science at the secondary level, then your pool becomes smaller and smaller. But I would say that if the overall reduction, then you compound that with the state of Arizona's budget issue, and then you've got a little bit of a perfect storm in terms of higher education. My discussions with your president have been about, and at some point, here's the other, at some point it keeps getting passed. The cost, there's the other effect, whether it's Pell Grants or whether any other cuts in higher education, they get passed on, okay? And to the student and to the family. In tuition increases, additional charges, fees, because you got to make up that gap. Back in the Stone Age when I came here, I was looking at my semester thing. It was $275. And you laugh, I don't know. And I thought that, and I still took out a loan. And now this additional, and here's the other insidious part, I think. And it's not just Pell Grant. You're beginning to limit accessibility. So hard-working, middle class, mom and dad working, my kids are going to go to college and we're going to help them. They do their part, and suddenly they're constrained economically as to what they can do because the cost keeps rising. So that's the biggest pass-on cost to you as a student and to your family, because then you narrow accessibility, because if that hard-working family, mom and dad, cannot afford to subsidize your ride here, you have to go the loan route, or you delay your plans. Yeah, you're gonna say something. Or you delay your plans.
Yeah. Well, and that's the issue, obviously, for us, is that our state does not support any state-based financial aid for students. So when this happens, of course, not only does this affect, from a federal level, but when there's no state-supported financial aid, except for sort of a measly matching funds, it's not even.
Yeah, and one of the things we're very concerned is block granting money to the state. Not just because it's Arizona, but that's my personal motivation. Because if you block grant some of the higher ed funds to Arizona, then that becomes their discretion as what their utility is going to be and their usage is going to be. You saw that with Access. You'll see it with other public school education monies, where they become offsets. So I'm going to cut here because I got this federal money, and it never was supposed to supplement state support. It wasn't supposed to supplant state support. It's supposed to supplement state support. And I'm afraid that with block grants, it starts to supplant state support, especially in this state. And that's my big concern here, that we kept passing on the cost, and you're going to make college education in Arizona, and if the trend continues in other parts of the country, available only to people who can afford it. And that's going to be a sad commentary for everybody down the road about what that means to, primarily to our society. Anything else?
question we always get asked when we're lobbying at the state, obviously, once again, it's state, that, you know, well, we need to make cuts, and, you know, for the reasons that you expressed, economic realities, the budget realities. But, you know, where do you want us to cut then, is always a question we get. So it's, I guess it's kind of a question for you, because obviously at least the education is a huge priority, and higher education is a huge priority. But the question, that's always the response that we get.
I know. And I told you earlier about the budget that we supported, that
Yeah.
we just couldn't go up and say, because I get it too. Oh, you're against cutting Pell Grants.
Yeah,
Where do we find the money?
yeah.
You don't want to mess with Medicare. Where do we find the money? You don't want to cut Trio and Gira. Where do we find the money?
Mhm.
And so we said, this is where we found the money. So I think in approaching some of the people that, and my heart goes out to you, some of the people you have to talk to at the legislature. And I'm glad you do, and you guys do a good job, and I get to see some of you in DC when you come and try to convince people. I said, I always tell the association students, come to me last, you know, because you're preaching to the choir. And then I really want to get some feedback on how it went with the other offices, and not just for my own curiosity. But I would, good example, and it really pisses them off when we use this example in Phoenix. You cut $538 million out of access because you had to, even though that money was coming in.
Mhm.
You had to. So you reduced eligibility to 125,000 people. Kids, old people, whatever. But that is a cut that we had to make too. And that was what you heard from the leadership of the state. 2 days later, they voted for a $578 million corporate tax cut. Isn't it interesting how that balanced out? When I wrote them about, when I said something publicly, they said that I was, I don't know, a bunch of good stuff, but that I was making that up. But so was it a coincidence? No, it's not a coincidence. And they've done a really good job of keeping many of us focused on some of the more weird political decisions they make, whether it is you can carry a gun here, thank God that was vetoed, or the birther, immigration, ethnic studies, same-sex marriage. So we all run and fight those. And meanwhile, they've been setting a fiscal policy in place that has probably, these are ugly. This is really hurtful here on this side. Cuts, the corporate tax was one. The protection of it's the same pattern as this country. The upper income bracket got a break. Prisons got the only increase, which I find ironic. And they got and you have to say you have to generate revenue. I think it is a lie to the American people to tell them, I'm going to cut my way out of this thing. You can't. And so, and I really think in Arizona, people are starting to come to turn the corner on this idea that we're getting in a deeper hole. The economy of the state is hurt by a lot of things, but I would suggest that there is other areas to cut. Do not ever get in a discussion with more fiscally conservative colleagues about defending a program only. They want to hear about economics. There is a place to get money, both at the federal and state level, that is less painful and begins to balance. And if there's going to be shared sacrifice, then maybe higher education takes a hit, but not mortally wounded like it's getting done right now. There's a hit, and then there's getting really hit. And so you should talk about shared sacrifice and why these subsidies and why companies now can come in and get tax breaks here in Arizona, even though their headquarters are based somewhere else, even though only they franchise out here. And the waste of money that some departments are looked at and some are not. And so you're going to have to generate money. You're going to have to. And otherwise, you won't be having this discussion, and you'll be talking to them again next year when the cuts are even deeper than they are. I think you have to be honest, because I think the people of Arizona, American people, are going to begin to figure that there has to be revenue generation along with the cuts.
Mm-hmm. But
There's
no one wants to tax in Arizona.
You know, well, you know, it's also, you know, here's this is what I love about being an American, the schizophrenia of all of us, you know. If every public poll says, and just talking federal, and it applies here to the state, leave education alone. 66%, 67, 70, whichever poll, whether it's the Wall Street poll or the ABC poll. Leave Social Security alone. Almost unanimity among us old people. You guys are a little, we'll see what happens down the road. Get a little more flexible on the subject. But, and then Medicaid, leave it alone. Invest in education, I already told you that. And job training and a jobs program. They want those things. Polling says that. Then you ask them, where should we cut? And this is the surprising one. Subsidies for gas and oil. Overwhelming number of the American people want that cut. Immediately repeal the upper 2% tax breaks. Restructure the estate tax. Close corporate loopholes. For the first time, there was a small majority, I mean 1 or 2 points, to say additional cuts in defense. Historically, that's the first time I've seen that. So there's a shift going on in the minds of the American people. We like these historic programs that are there, and we don't want them touched. But if we have to generate revenue, this is the areas that they want to look at. And you ask the American people, would you be willing to give more in order to keep all these? And there's a huge amount of people say yes. That's that whole shared sacrifice idea. So I think for your generation has to be the ones that really talks honestly to the American people about we do have to go in a whole different direction in this economy of ours. We can't keep doing it the same way. It's just not going to work. Ryan's budget is asking us to do what we did 9 years ago. And, you know, we're not supposed to talk about the past because we're supposed to be talking about the future. That's what our president says. But damn it, you know, we kind of got in this hole based on those policies, and now we're going to codify them in law forever. And get ourselves in the deeper hole. So, and the projections on the Ryan budget, it would cost the American people over 10 years 1.7 million jobs. And increase the deficit. So we're not getting out of the hole. So I would always present to these people there are choices. We're agreeing with you. We want to balance the budget, but we want to balance it here. I think if you start making that distinction more and more with people, you're going to find more and more people come to your side because you're not avoiding the problem. My colleagues have just railed against the gods because they don't want a program cut, which I don't, but offer no alternative to that. People aren't going to listen to you. You're going to be a naysayer, and nobody will listen to you. So the lobbying has to be about, and even if it's going to offend the person you're talking to, present it anyway, because they're eventually that's going to be the mindset that wins the day. Maybe not in my lifetime. No, I think pretty soon, 3 or 4 years, you'll start to see this starting to change already.
Can you address like the quality of education a little bit? Because I know that one of the things that I've been seeing is, you hear a lot of it in college, and I've heard of it in other programs too, is first off, we're getting increased class sizes, and that obviously.
That's the other point. You said, how does it affect?
Yeah, and I mean, but there's another thing that they were suggesting that's very, very near and dear to my heart. Would be the people program here. I mean, they do it everywhere in the country, but they bring students and they do like debate and all that sort of things. And I know all these like little programs that I think really, really affect the way that students are being brought up and are learning are being cut. And I don't know. I just kind of wanted to get here.
Yeah, even though I grew up in this town, my experience here, I'm born and grew up in this town, maybe 20 miles from this university. And the first time I visited the university is the first time I came to class. And I say that because what I learned here was huge. The people, situations, survival skills, and a variety of thought that I had never been open to before because I didn't grow up around. Classes. I had so many units because I couldn't decide what the hell I wanted to be. It's like historian, by the way, there's not a big job market waiting out there in line when you come out. You have to keep going for other classes, other degrees, and I didn't. So I became a social worker. It worked out. But saying that was a great experience. Exchange programs, people from other parts of the world that you. And so it opens your eyes to a lot of things. And I think one of the things that will hurt, it's these cuts in education is the extras you come to college for. The debate, the clubs, the student activities, the exchange students, the ability to exchange yourself somewhere. The practice of democracy on a campus. The experience cannot just be athletics outside the classroom. It's got to be, a lot of things have to happen because that's what makes it a whole education. We're seeing that in secondary education right now because of all this No Child Left Untested. We've narrowed the curriculum, so all we do is teach this. So if you're in high school and your thing that got you was band, the jazz orchestra, choir, the history club, electives, okay? If they're shrunk in order to get through this test, then what experience have you had? And it's, if you go to a high school, you'll see, library is only open 2 hours out of the day. The club, teachers don't want to stay and be sponsors for a club because there's no support for them. So go look at a high school and see how it's narrowed, and how that curriculum got so narrow, and worry about the fact that could happen at your level too, that you begin to narrow. That's another consequence, a bad consequence of the budget cuts that are going on. The increased class size, the ability not to bring into a campus the brightest and the best professors and instructors.
I mean, it's not even at the college level. So you said it's a high school level, and it even comes down lower than that, right? The middle school.
It's all narrowed. It's kind of sad. To go to a high school and call up and say, could I talk to your X club? You don't have it. And even activities like student council, where they used to take the kids away so they could teach them how to be student council members, doesn't exist. And if it's not done on that campus, it's not done. My experience in politics began in junior high and high school. I ran for representative 3 times and lost miserably to the same person over and over again. Linda Goss, it's burned into my head. I'm
sure she knows where you are now, though.
I don't know if she would have not kind of kind of stayed on the path. She was pretty good. She was pretty good. I mean, and she would get me on every time we'd have to get in front, because I'd get all uptight and nervous, and she just seemed to roll with yes questions and all this. And I'm like, oh crap, I'm gonna lose again. And she was smart enough always to run for treasurer, so she actually could turn all the purse strings of the high school. All the clubs had to come to her for money. She could have been formidable, but she decided to be, she stayed here for a while, and then she went to work with the Peace Corps and kind of stuck with it, you know, so that's kind of cool. And otherwise she'd be coming here and asking you about questions sort of about now. Anything else? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious to take it back to the student debt issue. I'm just wondering when, in your opinion, are we finally going to hit rock bottom? You know, there's been a lot of talk about, you know, as students continue to rack up this record level of debt, you know, and it seems like that's only going to be increasing as the total cost of attendance at universities increases. When are, you know, students actually going to stop coming to universities, you know, on a more, you know, larger scale than we've seen, and when are, you know, those?
Well, I hope that doesn't happen, but I think the abject example will be what keeps kids from coming here, meaning knowing that you graduated, but you graduated with $180,000 of debt, and then going, man, do I really want that? I think it's when they see their peers or the people older than them, the people ahead of them, going through those kinds of experiences and seeing their debt accumulate in order to be here. I think it's that reality that's going to be the biggest deterrent more than anything else. And you know, it's a finite world too, because you know, I know there's huge efforts, and the university's been very good about getting private foundation money to help subsidize students' financial needs here. That starts to shrink too, so that support's beginning to shrink as well. And I'm worried because I think this university's trajectory has been in research and development and science. That's the trajectory, that's the niche. And on a national level, that's why they win so many federal contracts, because of the faculty and because of the work they do here. And that's kind of the crown jewel. And if we at a federal level begin to lessen the support for those, then the students that are actively recruited because that's what they bring to the school, they're going to go somewhere else. They're going to go somewhere else, and that's the loss as well. So we took your name so that we can, where's Clara? Clara helps run my office here in Tucson. We'll be sending you stuff, not just on higher ed, but on the education stuff, and we'll send you a copy of an alternative budget that we proposed, so you can have it to look at. And engage more often as these topics get a little bit tighter and tighter. Somebody asked me the other day, and I'll give, if I would write a letter to Senator Pierce and Brewer about some of the education cuts, and I'll give you the same admonition. I'd love to, but I think that would hurt your cause for a couple of so it's best not to include me on your list when you send them something. But we're going to work real hard on this part of the federal part, because I'm philosophically committed to the fact that the federal government is here to supplement and not to supplant what the state should be doing. And for them, for state leadership to say the federal government take over this part of it, I think we owe a bigger responsibility to higher ed, but I don't want the money that comes to this university for students and programs to be used to offset almost entirely the bad decisions that the state is making about it. So look forward to it. We'll send you updates, and thank you for taking the time today. I appreciate it.